Hey, my name is Petra Cruz, and I'm obsessed with all things birth, but especially VBAC. I am a birth doula and mom who had a vaginal birth after 3 cesareans. In this podcast, we dive deep into the inspirational world of vaginal birth after cesarean. In each episode, you'll hear inspiring VBAC stories, practical tips from professionals who've championed the VBAC cause, as well as my personal journey and how it might help you on yours. From mindset shifts to evidence-based practices, you'll leave each episode feeling inspired and informed. Get ready to soak in the wisdom, embrace the strength within, and join this incredible VBAC community. This is the VBAC Junkie Podcast. You are in for a treat. You are always in for a treat when you're listening to this podcast, I feel like, because all these stories are just so magical and inspiring and just have such a unique spin on each one of them. They're just, so amazing. So today you're going to get to hear Carly's story. Carly is a mom of two living in Des Moines, Iowa. She is married to an ex-military airlines pilot. They transitioned out of military life, so they are excited about settling down in the Midwest to be around family. Carly, she, had her first cesarean and then she went on to have a VBAC in the hospital. Now, this was not without incident, so she had to be heavy on advocating for herself, and she did such an amazing job about it. Oh my gosh, I cannot wait for you to hear how she handled a very unsupportive and disrespectful doctor. So, without further ado, here's Carly's story.
All about talking about it and helping anybody who is trying for a VBAC. I'm about it. Let's chat.
I would love to start with like your first birth story because obviously that's your first cesarean, your only
Yeah.
cesarean, and then, just I feel like they deserve to have a story too, right? Because just because they were born cesarean doesn't mean they don't deserve to be, have their story told too. So, wherever you would like to
Well,
begin.
right. We found out that I was pregnant actually when we were still living in Germany. My husband was military at the time. And so I actually started going to a German OBGYN originally, and they do things a lot differently. Um, and so I only had like 2 appointments over there, and then we were moving home at like the height of the craziness with COVID.
Mm,
And so we weren't even sure we were gonna make it like home because they were wanting to pull everybody to stay because of all the crazy pants going on. And so we were like, are we moving? Are we not moving? We have no idea. And I'm over here pregnant and I'm like, I don't really care either way, but like we need to know what's going on. Um, and so we ended up finding out 3 days before we moved that we were in fact moving. Had to go to the OBGYN to get a note for the airline to leave the country because for them, with Lufthansa, you have to provide a note that you're okay to fly, or they can stop you from flying. And it has to be like within 24 hours that doctor has to give you that note. So I had to go, I had to get that note and, ended up getting home just fine. We were moving to El Paso, Texas. And honestly, my pregnancy was pretty normal, easy peasy. Really, I mean, I got sick like one time. It's kind of one of those pregnancies that you're like, ugh, those people, you know.
yeah.
So I mean, it really was until we got to about 36 weeks, and baby was breech. And so I was like, oh no, like, come on, like, there's still time, like, we can do this. But it was also the height of COVID. So, going to get like acupuncture or go see the people who do your back.
Chiropractor.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Going to the chiropractor really wasn't available unless you were like already a patient. And I obviously wasn't. And I couldn't even get into the doctor um, I know I'm kind of backtracking a little bit when we moved to El Paso because they were so backed up. And so I had my first appointment after moving. And we moved it like 17 weeks. I couldn't get into the doctor until like 23 weeks. And so we actually found out the gender just with like one of those like kind of third party um, ultrasound techs. And so that was an interesting kind of fun experience. But going back to like 36 weeks, I mean, my OB that I had been seeing, because if you're military, you just kind of see whoever is available for your next appointment. It's not consistent at all. And so that particular doctor that I saw when she saw I was breech, she was like, not a big deal. I'm going to give you this giant list of things that you can do. She recommended the exercises that you could do. Acupuncture. She gave me one that you put it's like a candle in between your toes. Um,
Yes.
so she told me about that one. I mean, she gave me this giant list and I couldn't do half of it because of COVID. And so we got to 27 weeks, still breech. I mean, she was a very happy little taco. And so then we got to 38 weeks, still breech. And I just kind of came to the conclusion where it was like, all right, this is happening. She's breech. Um, El Paso is not an area that you want to try to deliver breech just because nobody there specializes in that, let alone supports breech delivery vaginally. So it was just the time. But during all of my research for that pregnancy, I kept seeing VBAC over and over and over. And I was like, okay, well, like we're planning on more than one baby. VBAC, should be an option. So, like all hope isn't lost. Maybe for the second one I can do a VBAC. But for this one, it's okay. Like we're gonna do the C-section. So 38 and 4, I wake up and I'm just very uncomfortable. And I'm like, I can't just be sitting here just peeing myself constantly, because it's just very wet. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna give it some time. Like, let's whatever. But for 2 hours, I was like, yeah, I'm pretty confident that it's my water. And so I tell my husband, I go wake him up because that happened really early in the morning. And I was like, hey, I think my water like I have a slow leak. I'm not really sure, but I'm pretty sure. So, and he's like, "Okay, like we gotta go. We gotta go do this. We gotta go right now. Oh my gosh." And I'm like, "Relax. It's okay." And he's like, "What? That's not what's supposed to happen. You're supposed to be freaking out too." And I was like, "Nah, like we're just gonna kind of like chill for a little bit, see if contractions do start." I was honestly kind of on my last hope of baby, you know, with the contractions and stuff, baby would turn. So I think I was trying to just give her some time.
Right.
And so I was just waiting and I was like, no, like let's eat some breakfast and let's just, oh, okay. Like, so then eventually I was like, all right, well, we'll go ahead and go in, I guess. So on the way there, we hit Chick-fil-A. We got to the hospital and they did the swab test originally and they were like, no, no, it's testing negative. And I was like, y'all, I cannot be just constantly peeing for hours. Okay. Like, that's just not how it works. And they're like, I mean, we can do this other test, but it can take longer and it's more expensive. And we were on TRICARE. And I was like, guys, I don't like just run the test. Like, I know TRICARE covers it. Just do the test. What? And so they do the other test and it came up very positive pretty quickly. And they were like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess it is positive. So when was the last time you ate? And I was like, oh, I mean, we did eat on the way here. And they were like, oh, okay, so we're gonna schedule your C-section for like 4 p.m. And it was at like, I don't know, 11 when they said that. I was like, oh, great. So I'm cool as a cucumber. I'm fine. My husband is freaking out. And I was like, dude, would it make you feel better if I was also freaking out? Like, I just don't know how to help you. And he's like, I
Right.
don't know how you're not freaking out. And I was like, babe, like it's good. And then the closer we get to the C-section, the more, like I'm starting to get amped up. I've never had surgery in my life. I have no idea. But I don't know. I've always seen videos where they come in to do the spinal, like in the room with your spouse. But that's not how they did it, I guess. So maybe I
Right.
was a little confused on a spinal versus like an epidural.
Right.
And so, they take me, they wheel me into the room and they're like, okay, we're going to get this spinal in. My husband isn't there. I'm really nervous and the room is cold. And they're like, okay, like you're going to pretend that you're hugging a beach ball. And I was like, okay. And this doctor took like 3 attempts to get that spinal in.
Oh, wow.
And at the end, he was like, did you know that you had a slight spinal curve? And I was like, no. I've never had surgery. I have no idea. He goes, "Oh, well, next time you get a spinal, let them know because it'll make it easier." And I was like, "Yeah, bro. I'll make sure to do that."
Oh my
Like
gosh.
what? And I think the dosage was too high or something because I mean, that spinal was really, really strong and like I was kind of struggling to breathe a little bit. And they were testing and everything. Like I couldn't feel anything, so like that's good. I've heard stories before, where like the spinal didn't work all the way and like they had to do other things, but like mine was a little too strong. And so I let them know. I was like, I mean, this is rough. And they had the curtain like all the way up my neck. I mean, about halfway up my neck. So,
Wow.
and I'm spread out like Jesus. And I'm like, man, this is kind of scary. Like this is rough and they're kind of talking to me, but I mean, I am out of it. Like, I mean, I'm feeling really woozy. They start the surgery. Nobody's talking to me. My husband isn't next to me. And, they eventually bring Doug in, like right before they're gonna pull the baby out. And I just remember, like they got the baby out, they swaddled baby, and here comes Chloe next to my face, and I'm over here spread out like Jesus. Like I forgot I had arms. Like that's how loopy I was. I'm like, oh right, I have arms, but I'm like, I don't even know what to do right now. Like I don't know. And the picture has, me and my husband and the baby next to my face, and they put the thermometer right there, like right on my forehead. This like ridiculous black sticker on
Yeah,
my
the sticky
forehead
one.
that looks
Yes.
terrible. So that's like
Mm.
the only like, right as soon as baby was delivered picture that I have. And I just remember being so loopy. And then it was like the next 3 hours, I don't remember at all, like whatsoever. Um, and then, trying to, it was just not what I wanted. And that's the other thing about a cesarean is there are options that can make it more like family mother centered. And to have a cesarean like that where it just takes mom almost completely out. I couldn't do skin to skin. There wasn't any music playing. Like there are so many options that are available to you that, you can be aware of. You can ask for music. You can ask for, your husband to be with you either the whole time or like right after you get that spinal and everything. Like they can come in with you. So that was not my favorite experience for that one. And so, my recovery was fine. My recovery was good. Breastfeeding was a little difficult, especially with the height of COVID.
Hmm.
And, but I was gung ho. I'm like, okay, we're doing a VBAC next time. Like, we're going to do this.
I love
And
it.
yeah, so then, eventually, my husband was actually the one that was like, yeah, like I think we're ready for another one. And I was like, hold up. I had to sit here for like years to get you to be like, yeah, like let's have a baby. But now you're the one who, okay, you know. So we get pregnant again right away, and we were like right at that, mark where they're like, yeah, this is like the best time to get pregnant again. And they were gonna be almost exactly 2 years apart, from birth to birth. And so it
Hmm.
was like, okay, we're pregnant. I had done so much research and I was like, okay, I chose my doctor, who was actually off post. So usually with TRICARE, you are on post only, but they didn't have availability. And originally I was like, awesome, let's do this. Except I go see the doctor and the first appointment went actually really well. I was really excited. I was like, like my plan is to have a VBAC. And I had brought my surgical notes for, my first C-section with me. And he saw that. He was like, yeah, it looks like you're a great candidate. Everything, other than being breech, went super well. You didn't have any hypertension or anything. You didn't have gestational diabetes. And, he was like, yeah, like you're a great candidate. And I was feeling really good at that point. I was like, yes, I found a supportive doctor. Okay, like let's do it. Yeah. And then it was like two appointments later. Every like at the end of the previous appointment, he was like, "Yeah, if you decide that you want a C-section, just let me know." And I was like, "That's kind of a weird thing to say, but like okay, like just making sure I have choices. Sure. Yeah, okay, like that makes sense." And then the next one, he was like, "Yeah, if you don't feel like pushing, just like let me know that you wanted to schedule a C-section, and we'll get you scheduled." And I'm like,
Mm,
I'm just getting a very bait and switch
right.
feeling.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna get, I was so excited about this doctor. I was like, okay, let's give him one more chance. Like maybe I'm just getting a weird vibe. And so I go in for, I think it was like the 18-week appointment. And I was wondering when they were going to do the anatomy scan. I'm like, they haven't talked to me about it. I know it's coming up because they like to do those around the 20-week mark, but nobody said anything. So I had asked, and they were like, "Oh, well, you've already had one." And I was like, "Uh, no, they don't do anatomy scans usually before 20 weeks. Sometimes they'll do them at night, sometimes they'll do them a little early, but usually around, and that's what I said. And they're like, "No, you've already had one." And I was like, "No, like I'm telling you, like that's impossible." And so like, "Oh, well, if you haven't had one, he'll just do it today." And again, that
Hmm.
was like just a really odd thing to say because I was like, no, like usually an anatomy scan takes a hot minute.
Right.
And normally it's also with an ultrasound tech
Yeah.
as well. Like the doctor usually doesn't do it himself. And so I was like, okay. So we get into that appointment. And I mean, I swear to you, this ultrasound was less than 5 minutes. He pointed out, like, oh, there's her head and there's her legs. And yeah, her back looks fine. Um, and I like did one picture and I was just like, there's no, oh, and then at the end, he was like, oh, yeah, if you want to do a C-section, you just let me know. And I was
Oh, wow.
like, okay, yeah, no. So I called my
Mhm.
brother, who's also a doctor, and I was like, okay, dude, does this sound weird to you? Because, like, I feel weirded out. And he was like, did he record the ultrasound at all? And I was like, not that I saw. And he was like, yeah, you know, I can understand like you being completely healthy and like baby looks generally healthy, but there's so much that they can catch with an anatomy scan that I'd be a little sketched too. And so I was like, yeah, okay, I'm definitely switching doctors.
Mhm.
So that was around the same time that I was hiring a doula. And so I was talking to my doula, and the doula was also just like, yeah, okay, so where does he deliver? And so I told her the hospitals, and she was like, I mean, like, you can keep the doctor, obviously, like, it's your choice. But, like, in my experience, if you're trying to go for a VBAC, no. Mm-mm. I would 100% switch. And so with all of that together, I was like, yeah, I'm definitely getting a new doctor. And so, I do a lot of research, some more, and my doula was like, yeah, Texas Tech is like the best place to go. They're going to be the most supportive for the most part. They're more like VBAC tolerant,
Right.
but they're going to have a lot of specific if you're like this, you could have a VBAC.
Yeah.
If you meet this specific criteria, you can have a VBAC. But I was like, if that's the best I can get, all right, then I'll see them. Well, fine. Um, and after that, again, very normal pregnancy. I didn't have any issues. They really were tolerant. You get to like that 36 week mark and they're like, yeah, like when you get to, if you're still pregnant at about the 39 weeks, we'll talk about induction. And I was like, "Hmm, if you don't mind me asking, is that based off of the that one, trial that they did?" And they're like, "Well, as it stands right now, yeah, like that generally kind of tends to be policy." And I was like, "Yeah, see, I know that trial really well, actually. And if I don't have any health conditions that specifically say that like we need to induce, I'm not doing it." And they were
Yeah.
like, "Okay, well, we'll talk about it when when the time comes around."
Yeah, that
Um,
Arrive trial. If
mhm.
someone isn't familiar, it's the Arrive trial, and it's so crazy. We can talk
It's a
about it later.
mess.
You go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we're getting towards the end of the pregnancy, and I know that the delivering hospital at UMC, they generally do fine. They don't have the best VBAC record. They're, like I said, tolerant, but it just depends on who you're with, when you go to deliver. And I talked to my doula and I was like, "Hey, I really think I want to go to the military hospital in labor. They have the best VBAC, supportive physicians and midwives. I really, I know they kicked me out of the system just based on they didn't have the availability for my care, but I really want to go in labor." And she's like, honestly, like I really support that. I like, let's do it. If that's what you're feeling like you want to do, like let's do it. Um, at 27 weeks, baby wasn't moving as much. And so I was like, I'm gonna go ahead and go to the military hospital, have them look at me, and I'll talk to them about VBAC, see what they say. That way they're kind of prepared for me to come in. And I go, baby's fine. I talk to a doctor. It happens to be like the head doctor, and she was like, "Hey, like, what do you know about VBAC? Like, have you been talked to about the risks and benefits?" I felt really good. She went through my history. I had Chloe at that same hospital. And I was like, "Okay, awesome." She was like, "Yeah, like it would be preferred if you would have an appointment here before you deliver, but that might not be possible, but just let them know." um but yeah, we can absolutely take care of you if you come in labor. And I was like, "Okay, cool." So here comes 30, like the last day before 40 weeks, like right on the money. And it was like 1:30 in the morning. Here come contractions. And I was like, "Okay, like maybe, they might fizzle out. Like they might fizzle out. I don't know. We'll see." I try to sleep through them and I can't. And I'm just like, "Okay, I'm pretty sure like we're starting to ramp up here." So I get in the bath and I'm like, because a lot of times people say, if you get in the bath, they might fizzle out. All right. So I get in there and I'm like, "Nope, nope, this is not gonna work for me. No." So I tell my husband and I'm like, "Hey, I'm pretty sure that my contractions are starting. I'm gonna text the doula. They're not like serious by any means right now, and they weren't super consistent either, but they were like consistent enough to where I was like, "Well, we'll let her know." Well, because she was having to drive 45 minutes to the house. So I was like, I'll just, give her some notice. And, so she was like, "Okay, cool, sounds good. Let me know if things start getting serious and go ahead and put that, oh man, what is it? It's the electrical signal
Oh, the tens
thing."
unit.
Yeah, she was like,
Yeah,
"Go
yeah.
ahead and put the TENS unit on now, before things start to ramp up." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So I did that and I was in labor for that whole night into the next day. And my husband was like, "Yeah, I was right on the money. You're gonna have the baby right on your due date." And so I guess I might have gone into labor. Well, no, that'd be right. Okay, anyway. And so we go into the next day, and I mean, we're roller coastering bad. Like, I mean, if I laid down, they would ramp up like really hard, but they would, kind of space out. So they were just really intense, but spaced out more. And if I was up and about, they weren't as intense, but I mean, it was difficult. So I was in labor for like 29 hours.
Wow.
Um, and so, we get to, and I mean, I bake a cake. I specifically told my mom I was baking a cake in labor.
Love
It was
it.
going to be her first birthday cake.
Yes.
And, I took my daughter on a walk. I mean, I tried all the things. I was curb walking. I was doing the stretches and the exercise. I was doing all the things.
Hmm.
And nothing was steady yet until that evening. And that evening comes around and I'm like, okay, yeah, no, like I'm struggling with these contractions. And so I was like, okay, babe, like it's time to call the doula. I'm struggling a little bit. And so he calls the doula and lets her know, and she calls about 20 minutes into her drive. And she's like, yeah, so like how's she doing specifically? And he's like, yeah, it's getting a little rough. And so she's like, yeah, I'd say let's go ahead and go to the military hospital. Let's go to William Beaumont and I'll meet you there. And so she calls the hospital on her way to let them know that we're coming. And we get to the hospital, we walk in, the nurses check me, and they're like, yeah, you're at 3.5 centimeters. Your water is intact, but you have bought your ticket. Maybe they literally said bought your ticket, um, like to be in the hospital.
Hmm. To be
So, and I
admitted,
was
right.
right, exactly. And so I was like, like, is everything okay? And they're like, yeah, we're noticing some decels. And I was like, okay, is it possible that it's because of my position? Because they wanted me to be laying down to get the
Monitoring,
monitoring for
yeah,
the baby.
right.
And I was like, dude, like this baby does not want me laying down. Like at all. Like I was so extremely uncomfortable laying down. And that also kind of tracks with every time I went to lay down to like nap at all while I was in labor, it was rough. And so they're like, yeah, like that's absolutely possible, but to be on the safe side, we're gonna admit you for sure. And I was like, okay. And they're like, yeah, and we're gonna send the doctor in, but we want you to know that he's very military. And my husband and I
What
look at
does
each
that
other
mean?
and we're like, what does that mean? And so, to me, I'm thinking, like very to the point. He's not going to beat around the bush. He's going to be very like, this is what's going on. This is what we need to do. Like maybe bedside manner might not be amazing.
Right.
And well, that was So the doctor, so okay, right before the doctor comes in, I have a contraction. And like this whole time I went into the hospital at 311. So about every
Hmm.
3 minutes, and they're pretty intense. Like I was really struggling with them. And so the nurses had left and I got out of bed. I was like, I cannot do this anymore. I'm getting out of bed. And like straight up, I didn't put the gown on. I refused. I was not putting the gown on. And so I'm pantless, you know, with just
Yes.
my shirt. And, so I'm rocking beside the bed and I was like, hey, like Sarah, my doula, I was like, I need your help. Can you do some counter pressure for me? So I'm really struggling. And so, she gets behind me and, she's doing this counter pressure. And that is when the doctor comes in. And instead of coming in and going like, hi, Miss Richmond, I see here that, you're in labor, how are you doing? How are your contractions? No, 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 no. Mm-mm. That's not what he does. He literally comes in and he goes, what are you doing? Like looking straight at the doula. And she's like, I'm helping your patient here. She's struggling with a contraction. You're in my way. Oh, I understand. I'm gonna be moving here in just a moment. She's finishing up this contraction. Okay, well, you're in my way. You're making it so I can't do my job.
Oh my
He
gosh.
does. Yeah, uh-huh. So I was like, oh great, this is good. This is gonna go well.
Hmm.
So, Sarah moves out of the way. He comes over. I I get back into the bed because that's where he wants me. And he's like, Miss Richmond, why are you here? Like,
Oh,
that's an odd question. I'm in labor. And he was like, no, why are you at this facility when none of your like pre-labor appointments have been at this facility? And I was like, huh, okay. So I'm feeling very like attacked immediately.
yeah.
And very, very uncomfortable already.
Right.
And so I was like, well, sir, I delivered my daughter here at this hospital when I had my C-section. He already knew that I was a VBAC because I had already talked to the nurses. And I was like, I had my daughter here. I know that this is the most VBAC friendly facility. And the nurses were also trying to like help with this information while they were next to him, but he wanted to hear it from me. Mind you, I am having very intense contractions every 3 minutes. So I'm having to
Right.
pause while doing this.
Hmm.
And so he's like, okay, well, you need to understand the predicament that you are putting me and this hospital in by coming here in labor. And I was like, sir, okay, first off, like, I'm feeling very uncomfortable. And he's like, I am not trying to make you feel uncomfortable, but I need you to understand. I mean, he literally repeated that over and over again about how we needed to understand the predicament I was putting him and the hospital in. And I was like, sir,
Wow.
like, I brought all of my labs, I brought all of them. The only thing that I didn't have with me was the anatomy scan, but I had, gestational diabetes. I had all the things. I had all of the labs. And I had my post-op as well from my C-section. I had all the things. Not to mention, I was at the same hospital I delivered Chloe at.
Right.
So, like, they should have been able to look that up, but
Hmm.
apparently they couldn't. So, I
Hmm.
don't know. And he just keeps going. He just comes at me. And then eventually my husband was like, okay, dude, like, no disrespect, but like, do I need to go to the other hospital that she got all of her appointments done at to get you something that would make you feel more comfortable, or can we just treat my wife? And, so he was like, all right, whatever. I need to see if you're still intact. And we're all looking at each other like, what? And he's like, I need to see if your water broke. And I was like, just in my contraction fuzz, I couldn't
Hmm.
remember what that meant specifically.
Right.
So my doula was like, it's okay. It's just a swab. They're just gonna do a swab to see if your water broke. And then the nurses are over there like, no, like we already checked her. Like her water wasn't broken. And he's like, well, I need to know if her water is broken. And and he also put his hand up to the doula and was like, I do not interact with you and you don't make medical decisions.
Oh, wow.
And, I'm just like, what is going on? And so I
Right.
was like, that's fine. Like, you can do the swab for my water. Like, I don't have an issue with that. And so, so he's, getting gloves on and I'm having a contraction at this point, and my doula hears him ask for lubricant. And I was pretty sure I had heard him ask for a speculum.
Oh,
And I was like, what is going? And so she was like, are you wanting to do a cervical exam? And he was like, yeah, I am, but I don't talk to you.
wow.
And so Sarah looks at me and was like, hey, do you consent to a cervical exam? And I said, no, I just had one 30 minutes before. I don't need I mean, nothing's gonna have really changed that much in theory in half an hour. Like, no, I'm not, but you can absolutely do like check my water.
Hmm.
And so, and then he just stops. And he was like, I need to do a cervical exam and I need to check your water to be able to treat you. And I'm like, okay, are are you refusing to treat me because I refused a cervical exam? And he's like, no, you are refusing to let me treat you.
Wow.
And I'm like, sir, I really don't like the way that you are talking to me. And he goes, I am just trying to do the best that I can to treat you. And I was like, sir, I understand. He goes, you come into this hospital, you're wanting a VBAC, and you're not letting me see if are even a good candidate. I don't know how much you've even been advised on VBAC. And I'm sitting here like, sir, like I am very knowledgeable about VBAC. I am very confident about having a VBAC. That's what I want to do, and that's what I'm going to do. And he was like, okay, then tell me what you know about VBAC.
Oh my gosh. He's
And
like
so
quizzing you.
legit, yeah, like I felt very interrogated.
Right.
And so I'm gonna pull up my notes because I couldn't remember. So I was like, the major risks of VBAC is uterine rupture, and usually that's a risk of less than 1%. And he goes, no, that's wrong.
Uh,
And I was like, well, again, I'm having contractions
oh
here,
my
and so
gosh.
I'm trying to come up with all of these statistics and things in my head here, and I'm just like, what? And he was like, yeah, no, the actual risk of uterine rupture is like, he was like 1.9 to 5%, and so I was straight up was just like, can you show me that data, please?
Oh, I love it.
Oh, and then he got real upset.
Oh, I bet.
You could tell he was not happy with that.
Mm,
And then I was like, I'm done. Like I'm I'm so done with this. I want a new doctor.
hmm.
And then he gives me the strangest look. He's like, "Excuse me?" And I was like, "Yeah, I want a new doctor. You're not treating me. I feel disrespected. You have been interrogating me. You have been rude to not only myself, but also, the people I've brought with me. So, no. I want a new doctor." He goes, "Well, that's not possible." I was like, um there's always somebody else on
Yeah.
staff, if
Right.
not on call.
Yes.
And he goes, "No, sorry, I'm the only one."
Huh. Interesting.
Uh-huh. And so, but at that moment, I'm freaking out here. I'm
Yeah.
I'm just like, I'm in labor. I
Yeah.
hurt. I just want someone to take care of me.
Hmm.
What is happening right now? This is
Right.
not how I imagined this night to go at all whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so, he's like, "No, I'm it." And I don't get off until, oh geez, I think he said 5 a.m. And at this point it was like 3:30.
Hmm.
And so um I was just like, oh my God, like I don't, it's possible that I won't have this baby in 2 hours. I don't know. I have no idea. I came in
Right.
because what? And so I'm like, no, like I'm like, can I just labor like with the nurses then? And
Hmm.
like just wait for the new staff to come in because I'm sorry, but you're not treating me.
Right.
And he was like, "Well, I'm legally obligated to help you if you start needing like to deliver." And I was like, "Okay, I need to talk to my support. Just get out."
Right.
And so he was just very taken aback, and he's like, "All right, whatever." Like,
Wow.
okay. Um, and so he leaves, and the nurses, they've been there the whole time, and they're just like bug-eyed. So they also leave, and I'm like,
Oh,
Sarah,
wow.
like, I don't know what to do. What do I don't know the options. Like, what do I do? And so she's like, okay, it's okay. It's okay. Just take a deep breath. You're fine. You're safe. You're all right. You're okay. And I'm like, okay. And so like we do some breath exercises for a minute. We get me
Yeah.
kind of calmed down, and she's like, okay, we can stay and risk having this doctor deliver your baby, or we can again try to stay. You end up not delivering until the midwives come in and deliver with them. We can go home for a little while because most likely your labor is stalling because you're very, feeling very unsafe.
Yeah.
Um, or we can just go to UMC, the original kind of hospital that I had done the majority of my care with.
Right.
And I was like, okay, I don't I just let's just go home. I just want to go home. And so, we asked for the doctor to come back, and I was like, I'm signing out AMA. No. And he was just like, well, I wasn't going to admit you anyway, but
Oh
fine,
my
you can
gosh.
sign the paperwork. Even though I had
Wow.
literally been told I had bought my ticket for admission, which is why we had you know, and the nurses were like, yeah, we were, like, what? Like they were very
Wow.
confused. And
Right.
so he brings the paperwork, I sign it, he takes it back, and I'm like, we're leaving. I'm not interacting with this doctor anymore. I'm done.
Yeah.
And as he's walking away, the nurses were just like, I don't understand what just happened. I'm so sorry. I don't, and like they were just like I said, like very bug-eyed. They had no idea what just occurred.
Right.
And I was just like, it's not your fault, but we're leaving.
Yeah.
And so, we're leaving the hospital. And as because this is like I don't know, second, third level, so we're having to take the elevator down and
Hmm.
then walk out. And like, there's no close parking at this hospital. So,
Yeah.
like, you're having to walk a pretty good bit.
Hmm.
And as we're going down the elevator and I'm getting more and more uncomfortable. And so we're walking out and I'm just like, oh, okay, hold on. Like, I don't know, pretty quickly as we were walking out.
Hmm.
And so my doula was like, um, yeah, I think we're gonna head to the hospital. And I was like, yeah, okay. But in my delusional, very, very much in labor mind, I was like, no, 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 I've got to go home to get my like labor requests. Like
Oh,
I didn't bring it to
yeah.
this hospital. I want to go
Hmm.
get it. Like it's fine. We're gonna go get it and meet you at the hospital. She's like, okay. So that turns into like an F1 pit stop because I'm extremely uncomfortable. I'm feeling like I'm gonna throw up. My husband like races out of the truck to go get my labor
Yeah, like your birth
instructions.
preferences.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so, he's running to go get it and he's coming back and I'm like, okay, like we've got to go. And so, we make our way to UMC, but I mean, I am really, really struggling at this point. Like I'm really, really close. Definitely getting to that transition stage. And so, he's my husband's very flustered. I mean, he's going insane over here. And I'm trying to play any kind of music. I don't care what it is. Like the tens unit isn't working anymore. I'm just like,
Mhm.
it's a rough ride. That was
Yeah.
that was a rough ride. And so we get to the parking garage for UMC, the other hospital, and I don't know where to go because with the um, Texas Tech like midwives and OBs, they're actually in the building behind the actual hospital itself. So I had never gone in the front entrance. I had never been there.
Hmm.
And it's very smart, by the way, to like know the entrance and stuff of where you're going to deliver beforehand. That is definitely a good tip, by the way. And so I did not. And I barely made it out of the parking garage. Like Doug's having to be like, okay, babe, like come on. Like I know you're struggling, but like we've got to get into the hospital. You are not having this baby in the parking garage. And so he's escorting me. He's trying to get me um into the hospital, and we're like right at the front entrance. Like people are passing us, giving us this like, oh boy, like big, big eyes passing us. And
Yeah.
then one older employee, wearing scrubs, she is like, do you guys need a wheelchair? And my very, very lovely spouse goes, no. And I'm over here like, yes, yes, I do, actually. And so she's like, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm gonna go grab that. So she goes, she grabs the wheelchair, and she's like, "Do you guys know where you're going?" And I'm like, "Nope, nope, nope. But we've got to get there right now." And so she helps us into the elevator. She tells us exactly where to go. And as soon as we get out of the elevator, um, into labor delivery like triage check-in, there's a trash can right there and I'm immediately throwing up in it, which is just the grandest way to walk into labor and delivery.
Right.
And so Doug's checking us in and they're over here like, oh, can you sign this paperwork? And I'm like,
Oh
I'm
gosh.
a little busy right now. And so I feel a little better, but I also feel like I really have to pee. And I also know, I'm like, if I sit down right now, there's a chance that it's like, it's go time. But I'm
Right.
like, I don't have to push. I genuinely, I need to pee. So, Doug's like, I mean, okay. So I go into the bathroom and my water immediately breaks as soon as I sit down.
Oh, wow.
And so that's where like those blinding contractions start really hammering home there. And so I was like, oh, okay, yep, no, like we've gotta check me right now. We like right now. And so they get me into a triage bed, and my doula's right there because I mean she made it a little bit before we did, so she was already there. And so they were like, yeah, mhm, yeah, you fully dilated, like +1 station, like
Yeah.
this baby's ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're wheeling that triage bed over to the labor and delivery bed, and they're wanting me to just like transition onto my back. And I'm over here like, yeah, no, that's not happening. I'm gonna be on all fours. I don't care. Figure it out. And
I
they're like,
love it.
they're trying to hook me up to all the things. There's a bright light in my face,
Mm-hmm.
and they're trying to put like an IV in, and I'm just sitting there like, I can't right now. And my doula's right there like, okay, can we like get this light off of her, please? Like, and she took charge. She was like, okay, we're gonna get this light off of her. She does not want an IV. And I was like, no, nope, sure don't, nope. And so they're like, are you and I was like, yes, I am very sure, do not touch me. And so then they're still trying to, get these monitors, but the baby is, really low at this
Right.
point that they're having trouble getting anything at all. And so Sarah was like, okay, I know you want to be on all fours, but how about we kind of have the bed like reclined so you can lean over it and they can try to get those monitors on, like kind of trying to meet them halfway, but
Right.
also making sure that I'm comfortable.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I don't care. Fine. Like, fine. I don't care. And so, I'm still kind of where I wanted to be. And that was much more comfortable because I could like lay my chest on the pillow completely. And so then I'm feeling the need to push. And I'm like, I'm pushing like, right now. And they're like, no, no,
Mm-hmm.
no, 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 no. The doctor isn't here. The doctor isn't here. Now, mind you, I have already told my husband, I don't care. I am not pushing. So if
Right.
you have to catch this baby, you're catching this baby. And
Yeah.
that was before I went into labor. So, I make eyes with my spouse. And but there's like, 2, 3 nurses at least in this
Right.
room. And so, I was like, I am not pushing. Figure it out. Literally said that. And, they're like, oh my God, like, oh, ah. And so then I feel like I need to poop. And I was like, I knew that anatomically that makes sense, but
Mm-hmm.
there was also just this, like, oh no, oh no. So I look at Sarah and I'm like, girl, I've got to go, I've got to go. And she's like, no, no, that's a really good sign. I was like, no, Sarah, like it's going to happen. Okay. Like it is. And she's like, okay, you're okay. They're gonna catch it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Big deep breaths. You're fine. Let's just get this baby here. You're okay. And so she's like, okay, are you ready to do this? And I was like, yeah. And so, and those first few pushes come and then we get to like the ring of fire where I'm like, okay, no, 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 like I've got to pause. I've got to pause because if I kept going, I was gonna tear. And I
Mm-hmm.
knew it. And that's the one thing about not having an epidural where you can kind of read your body a little bit, to be like, okay, like I've got to slow down a little
Yeah.
bit. So I was very much appreciative that I didn't end up with an epidural. And so we got to the ring of fire and I was like, okay, hold on. And they're like, push, like you're good. And I was like, no, hold on. Mm-mm. And so that final push came in and out baby was. And, they got me laid down and everything, and I could do immediate skin to skin. And I was just very like, wow, that all just happened. So I was a little bit in shock for sure.
Yeah.
And they're like are you okay? And I was like, yeah, just give me a second.
Mm-hmm.
That was a lot. But one of the first things that I had said was, "Oh my God, that hurt." And F that doctor immediately.
I love
And
it.
and the doctor who actually had ended up showing, not that I had noticed at all, um, just kind of gave me a weird look. And I was like, no, 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 like not you. Not, I promise it wasn't you. And my doula was right next to me and she was like, I am so incredibly proud of you. Like you did
Mm-hmm.
so good. And my husband's over here just like, what? He-
Yeah.
He's not even sure what's going on. And he's just like, I am so proud of you, but like what? And I was like, are you good? And he goes, you just made us sound like a banshee. And there she was. I don't know. He literally said banshee. And I was like, oh, well, that's great. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so after that, everything was so like I didn't tear at all whatsoever. And nursing went so much better the second time around. I didn't have any IVs. So anytime the nurses would come in, they're like, okay, like we need to check your stitches, like we need to check your IV. I was like, guys, I don't have any of that. And they're
Wow.
like, oh, okay, you're the easy patient.
Wow.
And I was like, I mean, in theory, I don't think that the nurses would agree, how I came in exactly. But yeah, no, like it was um uh, technically like the whole experience was a good one. I'm very proud of myself.
Yeah.
But to have a doctor who, you're coming in like you're putting yourself a little bit into their hands to help you and to be met with somebody who is not nice. They're
Yeah.
interrogating you. They're, I mean, he wasn't even going to ask about a cervical check. He was just going to do it.
Right.
And, that's why the doula, when Sarah was like, do you consent to this? Because she
Mm-hmm.
knew it was going to happen. And it
Mm-hmm.
does happen. It happens all the
Yeah.
time. And so I was so appreciative of my doula. I was proud of myself. But, it's so important to know that, yeah, like I'm glad that I did my research. I knew I could say no to anything, everything really.
Yeah.
Um, but that I mean, I could be like, no, I want a new doctor. I'm not dealing with this.
Mm-hmm.
Get me somebody else. Like to know that I could do that was very empowering, as well as being like, no, like I don't consent to a cervical check. I'm not going to do that. And then to sign out AMA.
Yeah.
Um, that can be very scary.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily, advise it in all situations. Obviously, like, you're definitely having to balance, your own personal safety, the baby's safety. But in my case, everything was fine. Everything was good. All my vitals were good. The only thing that they saw were some slight decels. And but that is a risk in and of itself, where it's like, are they serious decels? But as soon as I was standing up, they went away,
Right.
and so it was like, no, like I am confident that I am safe. I am okay to leave this hospital and to go somewhere else where I hopefully am treated better. And
Yeah.
that's what I did. Almost had a car baby, which is hilarious. My last name, or at least, well, I never changed mine, but my husband's last name is Carr.
Oh, how
So
funny.
we almost had a car baby in both sense of the word there.
Oh my gosh, I just love your story so much. And, if people aren't familiar with the acronym AMA, it means going against medical advice. So you always have this option. But I love, Carly, how you emphasize like, it's not necessarily like, don't just do it just to do it, like just to piss the doctor off or something. Like, if you genuinely feel like, this is not the right choice for you and it's more dangerous or more stressful for you to stay at that place where you're at, you can absolutely sign those forms and get out of there and go somewhere else because you
Yeah.
are not constrained by any type of law. No law says that you have to stay there. Even if you're in active labor, even if you're 9 or 10 centimeters, you can still leave. It's totally your choice.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes you'll get these kind of odd threats about insurance and whatever, and
Yes,
it's like, no, that is not correct at all.
right.
I would, do some research to make sure that the hospital you're transferring to will take your insurances in general.
Yeah.
I could just like a in provider option for you. Um, but yeah, you can absolutely leave and the insurance will cover you as long as they're in network or, whatever. But um that and it is scary. That is a hard choice to make. But for
Yeah.
me, it was straight up just like this doctor is not respectful of me in any way, shape, or form. The fact that he came in, he didn't even talk to me to begin with. He
Right.
never once asked me how I was doing or how my contractions were. Not once. He did not care.
Mm-hmm.
So to have somebody like that, like I'm going to end up in a C-section in this case when it's unnecessary. I'm already stressed out because of this man.
Yeah.
And no, I'm not going to do this and I feel safe to leave. My husband was right there with me. He was like,
Mm-hmm.
"No, like I think that this is like if this is what you want to do." He was completely supportive.
Yeah.
My doula was, shocked. She'd never seen this before either, and she was like, "Yeah, like I like these are the options." She never told me which way she would go,
Mm-hmm.
but she was like, "No, like I'm supportive of your decision."
Right.
And there was a possibility that my labor could have stalled and we could have gone home and, waited again and then left for UMC.
Yeah.
Um, and there is a possibility that I could have stayed at the hospital, dealt with Dr. What's his face, and, like ended up delivering there or having a different, like there's just so many things to kind of balance when you're making these decisions. And it's so hard when you are in labor because you just want somebody that's going to care and
Yeah.
and be respectful.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, that's not always the case. And it's not always the case that you're going to find a supportive provider that is going to be with you the entire time.
Yeah.
When I was listening to the VBAC Link podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and my husband was so tired of that
Yeah, I
by the end
bet.
of my pregnancy. He was so done. He was
Mm-hmm.
like, thank God. But you had so many people who were like, find that supportive provider, find it, find it, find it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that choice. The
Right.
only choice that I had was going to be a home birth with a midwife,
Mm-hmm.
and that was it. There
Yeah.
there were no 100% supportive providers within hours of El
Wow.
Paso. And I personally was not willing to do that. Some people are, absolutely. If you feel comfortable going, that distance, go for it. I just was not comfortable doing that. And so I
Yeah.
was like, you know what? I'm making my mind up. I'm going to be as educated as I can be, knowing that, I'm going to go for a TOLAC. I'm going to do a trial of labor, but it might end up in a C-section and that's okay, but I want it to be in terms that is medically necessary for me and not just because, this is what we do or this is what we're going to do and this is what I advise. Like, no, like, is this right for me? Give me all of the information you can so I can make the best decision for myself.
Exactly. And that's the way it should be. And that's what ACOG's guidelines actually state that you give your patient all of the information on both sides and let them decide. But unfortunately, that is not honored in most cases. So having like that supportive system like you had your husband on board, you had your doula on board, which I feel like that can really transform your birth. Like
Hmm.
personally, I had my VBAC and I had no supportive provider either. And I had my doula and my husband in my corner. I was like, I'm good. I know this is going to be great and it's going to be on my
Exactly.
terms. So,
Hmm.
yeah. So, obviously, you did things differently for this birth. So, if somebody were to like want to plan for VBAC, what would be your greatest tip for them?
I mean, the biggest one is like 100% knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
Know what you can and, like kind of what you can't do. There's going to be some hospitals that straight up, they're not going to be supportive. There might actually, so we moved to Des Moines recently, and there are some hospitals here who they straight up have a VBAC ban. So
Yeah.
while you're, looking for providers, see who has a VBAC ban. Don't go there. Um, just do your best. Knowledge is power. Listen to the different podcasts and really, really, inform your partner. I mean, that was the biggest thing for me is you're educating yourself, but also make sure to educate your partner because sometimes they get manipulated by being like, oh, well, this is what we should do because, I'm a doctor and,
Yeah.
she's delirious. So let's make sure that, we're doing this the safe way. Like I mean, I've heard it. It has never happened to me, but I know that it happens where your partner gets manipulated too.
Oh, yeah.
So make sure everybody is on board. Make sure everybody knows, the ins and outs. Go to that birthing class. Go, talk to your doula if you have one. You
Mhm.
know, just educate yourself. It's yourself and your partner.
Absolutely. And that knowledge, nobody can take that away from you, and you can only build on
Exactly.
it. So I love that.
100%.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today. And I didn't ask you this before, but if someone were to want to like chat with you, would you be up for something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always forget my like Instagram handle, so I'm gonna look it up just to make sure I don't give the wrong one.
Yeah, no
Um,
worries. And I'll stick it in the show notes too, so that they can just like click on it.
yeah, it's Adventure for Better, and it's the number four.
Love it.
Um, yeah, so that's my Instagram, and that's gonna be like the best place to get a hold of me.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Carly. Oh my gosh, your story is just so inspiring, and I'm so amazed by you and what you accomplished. You're amazing.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, and like congratulations on your own VBAC. I know
Oh,
that it's,
thank you.
for everybody who's had one. You're
Hmm.
kind of having to fight for it a little bit. I'm hoping that that'll change.
Yeah.
I know that the ICANN group of Iowa is trying to change the VBAC bans that are in
Hmm.
these hospitals.
Right.
But yeah, look into local ICANN groups too. That's good advice as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, and I will hopefully chat with you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fun. Anytime.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the VBAC Junkie podcast. Make sure to leave a rating and subscribe to the show so that you don't miss an episode. And also, I have a free gift for you. If you would like to have a guide on how to prepare for a VBAC, head to my website at www.birthingcometrue.com/VBAC guide. And all of this will be in the show notes, so you can just click that link and head there and download this free guide. I hope you have an amazing week. Until next time, bye.